you, Malaprops, for hosting us.
Constance and I are in a critique group together, and when we found out that we were going to have books come out about the same time, we thought it would be fun to do a launch together. But our books are very different. And so we came up with the title Poignant and Funny, picture books that run the gamut. And it really is a testament to how diverse the genre is. And so I have a question for you, Constance. Why are you drawn to writing funny books for kids?
Thank you, Shannon. I am drawn to writing funny books, and that it's just sort of part of who I am. And it gives me the chance to channel my goofy personality into something good rather than evil. And I grew up in a really funny family. And my sister, who is very funny, is here. You can talk to her later for a laugh. Rita's here. And we used to watch a lot of Bugs Bunny and just make each other laugh. And, you know, if you grow up in a big family, it becomes almost a competitive thing to see who can be the funniest. So it's definitely part of my upbringing. And then the other side of it is I just love to hear kids laugh. I love creating things that bring joy to kids. I visited a bunch of schools, mainly at this point I visited with Everybody Says Meow. And, you know, hearing the kids, they get my sense of humor, and hearing them laugh, it's just, I love being that part of their day. And Shannon, I want to ask you, not that I put my glasses on, why are you drawn to writing stories for kids that are historical and poignant?
I grew up on a 100-acre farm in rural North Carolina. My grandparents owned the farm, and when they had 6 sons. And when each son got married, they gave him an acre of land to live on, build a house, and start a family. So I lived within walking distance of my grandparents, 5 aunts, 5 uncles, and 11 cousins. And my grandparents, we lived very primitively compared to a lot of people. We had cows and pigs and chickens, and my grandma churned butter, and we had a large vegetable garden, and she canned and she quilted. And so I think when I write or read these books that I feel a sense of home, that I just feel this warmness, and I want to share that. I don't want it to be forgotten. So what we're going to do is Constance is going to do a 10-minute slideshow. And then we're going to, and then we're going to chat. We're going to ask each other another question. Then I'm going to do a 10-minute slideshow. Then we'll have some time for Q&A if there are any, and we'll be around a book sign. So take it away, Constance.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. And I'm here to talk about my new picture book, Tiny Spoon versus Little Fork. It's there and it's here, and this book has been a long time coming, and I'll give you an idea. That is my now 19-year-old son back when he was a baby, and as you can see, there was an attempt at feeding. And I remember when I was first trying to feed him, that is really when I first got the idea for this book. You know, they're moving from breastfeeding to having some solids, and you have your little spoon ready, and you dip it in the food, and then you go for the mouth, and then a lot of times kids will do the last minute head swivel, and there's food everywhere. And at that time, I thought, there's a story here, and I thought of it as being a story from the point of view of the spoon. That's why I was really focused on first. I think I mentioned Bugs Bunny, and when I first wrote this book, and here's my wonderful early illustration. As I said, I thought about the spoon, and it was almost like a Bugs Bunny type of, oh, on the spoon, see, and I'm going in. Oh no, is that a tooth I see? I'm gonna feed this baby no matter what. Come on, Mom, make with the vroom vroom noises. So I wrote that story. It was very silly and it was funny, and it just kind of didn't go anywhere for a long time. And then I one day showed it to my editor, Jill Davis, who's awesome. And she liked the idea, but of course we both talked about it and realized there needed to be a lot more characters. So we brought in a little fork, which is great sort of conceptual, I think, because not only is it fun to have a spoon and a fork sort of fighting it out, but the fork is sort of the next, you can think of it as the next step in development for a baby. So it sort of becomes about, how kids are growing and changing and how the past versus the future. And at one point there was a sippy cup who didn't make it into the final cut. Of course, there was a cat. I was like, please, can I have a cat? That didn't work out. There is a Bubby Wabbit who's the funny sidekick. And the clock becomes very animated through partly because of the illustrators. But so we had our story, we had our characters, I had my everything set with the manuscript. And I have illustrated in the past. I illustrated this book. But I knew that this new one would involve kitchen, spaces, a fork and spoon traveling through space, falling, and perspective, and all things that I just are not my forte. So I always knew that I wanted to find illustrators that were not me. So we looked, and we were lucky enough to find these two charming young men, Dan and Jason. They're so super talented. And what I loved about working with them is they have this comic book background. So they really brought like all the liveliness of almost like, graphic novel type for youngest kids, speech bubbles, which dialogue is my thing. So that totally makes sense for me. The sort of the progression of action in a story, and just the panels and everything just worked perfectly. So I'm very, very thankful to Dan and Jason. And I really recommend their books. Blueberry and Pancakes is one of their series, and Barb the Berserker. They're just so, so talented. So here's an example of a page from the book. I am going to read it, but I want to point this out because this to me is really classic graphic novel. It's all panels. It's all speech bubbles. And then there are words that become like a concrete word. Is that the right word, Blocky? Like a concrete poem, like thunk becomes like this visual thing that I think is fun for kids. If you think of a kid just learning language and seeing like words or thunk, it's something exciting. And also, even if the kid is, hears the story once or even hasn't, but just looks at this progression, that's pre-literacy visual learning. They can, there's another phrase that's slipping my mind, but yeah, they can read it just by the progression. So some of you, I doubt this crowd, but some of you might be wondering, should kids be reading graphic novels? Excuse me. And the reason I ask that even is because I used to work in a library, West Asheville Library, and sometimes kids would come in. We had a great collection of picture books and lots of books, and we had a small graphic novel section. And every once in a while, a kid would come in and be running toward the graphic novel section, so excited. And I could almost cry talking about this. A parent would say, oh no, you're not reading that. You have to read a real book, which is, please don't say that to your child. I know none of you good people would. But I think that, graphic novels have come a long way in terms of people realizing how respectable they are. They're fully developed. They have narrative arcs. They have great characters. They're beautifully done. They're truly works of art. So I encourage everyone. And also I put together this slide to further drive home the point. Oh no, why is she yelling at us? Kids should read books that make them want to read more books. I mean, that's the bottom line to me. Your kid is excited about a book, and I think this is one way to get into reading through the graphic novel. I really am having a problem to take a moment for. Okay, I think the next one. Okay, now here's my book. Time for breakfast. And this is what I mean about these illustrators. They just brought so much. I'm not going to keep interrupting, but bring. And they made the clock like these crazy arms and just so frantic. And then if you notice on the fridge, I love all the kids' baby art. I love the photo of the baby. And also they put all our initials on it. C.L., Dan and Jason. And also Jill Davis is our editor. So they really fit it all in. Time for breakfast. Who's ready to knock it out of the park? I am. Me. Wait a minute. Who are you? Everyone knows me. I'm Tiny Spoon. That's my feminine voice. And I feed the baby. The name's Little Fork. The job, feed the baby. I've always fed the baby. She loves to sip and savor and slurp. But now baby wants to bite and chomp and munch. She wants me. So here I go. Cannonball. Wait for me. Go away, little fork. I am round. I can hold anything. And I come from a long line of prominent spoons. And soup spoon. Dishes of chowder broth. And tomato soup with love. Daddy serving spoon. Ladles pasta, stew, and fruit salad with a smile. Cousin teaspoon. Stirs together tea and sugar from morning till night. Grandpa scoop. Empties ice cream cartons top to bottom before you can say fudge ripple. Big deal. Forks rule. I am strong. I am pointy. I have perfect aim. And check out my family. Uncle salad fork, impaling cucumber, tomato, and lettuce in one quick jab. Mama carving fork, a vital part of every Thanksgiving dinner. Cousin dinner fork, keeping the big folks fed with a variety of victuals. And great grandma tuning fork, the musician in the family. What a voice. I'm glad I can make myself laugh. What's your point, Pointy? I was there the first time baby ate solid food. I'll never forget that day. I was in the drawer when Dad picked me up and dipped me into a jar of mashed pears. Then Dad did some airplane noises. Vroom, vroom, I flew in and fed the baby. And we've been besties ever since. Boring. I'd like to see you try and twirl spaghetti. Big deal. I'd like to see what you would do with chicken soup. Thump, thump, thump. Spoon, rock. Here's baby now. The moment of truth has arrived. Baby likes to chew my ears. Look, baby chose me. Baby chose me too. What about me? Yay, but also, uh-oh. Close your eyes, Fork. What is happening? Whee! This is not fun. It's a little fun. Whoa! Yikes! Ouch! Oh, I'm okay. Look at all those arms. Baby wants breakfast now. But how will we get back? I'll shimmy. Bonk. I'll climb. Thunk. I'll toss you. Hop. Toss. Bink bonk. Oh, sorry. Spoon, frog. We're so close and yet so far. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? I think so. We'll use your pokey head. Thunk. Pull back. And lift off. Sproing. My favorite word in the book. Here we come, baby. We made it. I got the oatmeal. Scrambled eggs. I'm on it. See, they were both important. Young spoon, young frog. Did anyone miss me? We fed the baby. High five. We rock. Uh-oh. Grab. Are we going where I think we're going? Grab. Yes. Next stop. The dishwasher. Wanna hold my hand? Yay. The end. I think it wasn't wonderful enough to write this book. My publisher asked me to do a special giveaway, which I have some copies of a placemat, and one side is puzzles, and I love puzzles, so I feel like it was a dream come true. I did these very advanced, as you can see, crossword puzzles and scrambles. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Am I asking the question?
Yes.
Oh, yes, I am. All right, well, let's get back to Shannon already. Shannon, who do you see as the ideal audience for your book?
My book is really written in a very lyrical language. And when I show you the illustrations, you'll see that there's a lot to look at. So I think anytime that somebody wants to read to a child, that it makes a beautiful book for that. But also in a classroom, teachers can use it to teach lyrical language. They can use it to teach about the Appalachian region and its traditions. And art teachers, when I show you some of the art, you will see that it would really inspire art projects. But basically, anybody who loves quilting, I think, would enjoy the book. And so that's kind of who I see as my ideal audience. And what about you, Constance? Who do you see as your ideal audience? And excuse me, because I have to switch slideshows while she answers.
Yes. I think this could be a great baby shower gift, or a gift for any kind of new parent who's has a kid that's just learning how to eat and starting that process. Or for if you have an older sibling and you want a book that they can share with their baby sibling, that could be fun too. But also for classroom, I think it'd be fun for a teacher. It could be good for a teacher who wants to talk about shared goals and finding commonality. And as one of my illustrators said, how teamwork makes the dream work. So yeah, I hope that it has a broad appeal. And now Shannon's going to talk about her very beautiful book.
My book is part of a series. It's called the Storyteller series. And the things that these books have in common is that they are all set in Appalachia, and they all look at different ways to tell a story. So the first book is called Saving Granddaddy Stories, Ray Hicks, The Voice of Appalachia. It's about oral storyteller Ray Hicks, who lived on Beech Mountain, and he was known for telling jack tales that had been passed down through his family for 7 generations. The second book is called She Sang for the Mountains, the story of Jean Ritchie. She was a singer, songwriter, activist. And Jean wrote ballads, and a ballad is really just a story that has been set to music. She was also a dulcimer player. You see the dulcimer on the front. And she was a contemporary of people like Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie. And then the book that we're going to talk about tonight is called Story Quilts, Appalachian Women Speak. And that book is about how people have told stories through quilts. So how did I become a storyteller? I became a storyteller because of my sister. Here you see the two of us in rocking chairs. She's the one that's waving to you, the smaller child. And we shared a bedroom growing up. And my parents would say to us, go to sleep. They turn out the lights. And that almost never happened. I could not read to her because the lights were out. And she'd say, tell me a story. So I would have to make up stories. And I think that's how I became a storyteller. Why do I write about Appalachia? I grew up in Yadkin County, North Carolina. That county is officially part of Appalachia. I am a graduate of Appalachian State University, and I currently live in Asheville. So I see these beautiful mountains every day. The illustrator for my books is Sophie Page. Sophie is a mixed media illustrator. She crafts her images in 2 and 3 dimensions out of paper, clay, fabric, and wire. And that's why I said that these books would really inspire art projects. I want to show you a little bit about Sophie's artistic process. Here is how she made the mountains that you will see in the book. She made them out of layered cut paper and watercolors. And so you see the mountains in progress, and then you see how they look in the actual illustrations. This is one of the characters in the book, and Sophie made the face and the hands out of clay. And then the actual dress itself is made out of paper. So she is very, very talented, and these books really are a work of art. Why quilts? Well, one reason is because my editor said, I think we'd like to have a quilt book.
That's a good reason.
That kind of started it. And then I initially was looking for a famous quilter, and I couldn't find anybody that hadn't already been handled beautifully. And then I ran across this exhibit at the North Carolina Museum of History called Quilt Speak. And after I read their exhibit catalog and looked online, I thought, I don't really need one person. I can write about quilters in general. This particular quilt has been handed down through my extended family. It was made in 1857. And what happened was a home in the community had burned, and all of the women got together and they each contributed a square. The squares are signed, and that's why it's called a signature quilt. And here's a particular square, and you can see it's kind of hard to read because 1857 was a long time ago. So what I want you to think about whenever I am reading you the story is who gets to tell history. And a lot of times women, and especially poor women, have been left out of history. And so if we are going to hear their voices, we have to look at new ways of interpreting the past. History has forgotten most Appalachian women. Many of them couldn't read or write. They stayed close to home and raised large families. Appalachian women worked their fingers to the bone, cooking, cleaning, gardening, canning. Then at day's end, they threaded their needles, reached for their rag bags, pieced colorful squares, and turned scraps into quilts that told stories. Most every night, a girl would watch her mama sew by the kerosene lamp until finally she was old enough to make quilt squares of her own. She would reach into the rag bag and pull out scraps, maybe from an old apron. An apron faded so blue it almost looked purple when the light hit it just right. An apron that had belonged to her granny. I'm going to have to get up because I can't see. The color reminded her of the Blue Ridge Mountains, the mountains she called home. She would sew those scraps together stitch by stitch, hum a lonesome tune, maybe a ballad called Fair Ellender, and remember when her granny sang that song to her. That apron would be the heart of her quilt. The scraps from a white pillowcase might remind her of wispy clouds that kissed the mountains and of the snow that covered them in winter. She would piece together strips of yellow, orange, and pink, merging the colors into blocks that blended like a mountain sunrise. She would search for scraps, the colors of mountain flowers, trillium, lady slippers, columbines, goldenrod, asters, and black-eyed Susan. Did you know that there are more than 1,500 species of wildflowers in our mountains? She would cut strips of muslin for a border, long and rectangular, its evergreen hue reminding her of the pine trees that stand tall among barren maples in the dead of winter. I could look at the computer, couldn't I?
It's a gorgeous page.
Yeah, it is a gorgeous page, but it's really hard to see. She would move her squares like puzzle pieces until they told a story of the beauty of her mountains, then stitch them together scene by scene. History books don't say much about Appalachian women. Many of them couldn't read or write, but they left behind patchwork quilts. Some even hang on museum walls, quilts that whisper long forgotten stories if you know how to listen. So that's the book. For those of you who are not familiar, there is a National Quilting Museum in Paducah, Kentucky. They have quilt camps, scout activities, a national school block challenge, and a junior quilters club. So to learn more about it, you can look at www.quiltmuseum.org. And probably the most exciting thing for me as an author is that a fourth book is coming to the series. It will be next year. That book is about an Asheville author. Her name is Wilma Dykeman. The book is called Of Words and Water, the story of Wilma Dykeman, writer, historian, environmentalist. And what Wilma is known for is writing a book called The French Broad. And that book is about, she was one of the first people to talk about saving the French Broad River and its tributaries and stopping the pollution, and how that would attract new industries to our area. And that's really what has happened with all the growing companies. So anyway, that's it. Look for book 4 next year.
Yay.
I'm so sorry. It just did not show up very well.
That was very interesting. And I didn't realize that you were at one point thinking about doing a book about one particular quilter. I think it's so much better that it's about this group of women and it's about community and what you're saying about like lost history. It's really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, it just kind of evolved.
Neat.
Yeah. So does anybody have any questions for us, or did any questions come in online? Or
Let's start with the in-person audience.
all right.
Not all at once.
Do we have a shy crowd?
Or did we just cover it all?
Other books, different illustrators. How did you find this particular illustrator / artist?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Okay. When you write a picture book, you usually have nothing to do with whoever illustrates it. The publisher chooses the illustrator. So my publisher had seen Sophie's artwork and thought that she would be the perfect person to illustrate this series. And so she is actually the illustrator for all 3 books in the series and will be the illustrator for the 4th book as well.
Oh, wonderful.
So,
Are
yes.
there quilt competitions in North Carolina?
I don't know if there are competitions, but I'll tell you that there are big quilt exhibits. There was one last weekend in Hickory at the convention center.
Oh,
And the Appalachian State Fair and some of the state fairs always have a big judging of the quilts.
And there was a quilt show here a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
Too.
in Asheville there was?
I think so, because I bought fabric at the quilt shop and it was cheap. It's a quilt
Oh,
show.
that's good. So you're a quilter too? A little bit, trying to be.
Are you a quilter?
I am not. My mother quilted and my grandmother quilted, and it did not get passed on.
So
My husband will tell you my husband will tell you I don't even hem pants
That's harder.
or
I'm
buttons.
sure you're a good wife in other ways.
In other ways, but yeah, he sews on his own buttons and his pants have to go to the dry cleaners.
Yes?
Can both of you talk about the audience for your books in terms of the age range and reading level? Because I know those are a little, in addition to the tone, those are a little bit different as well.
Yeah. My book, if you were to ask my publisher, they would say 7 to 10 years old.
I think my publisher might say something like 4 to 8, and maybe the humor is good for older kids, but I also would hope that, especially if it's an older kid reading to a baby or reading to a 2 or 3 year old, I think that could really work too. So I think it could be, yeah, sort of 3 to 8 maybe. Be younger. Yes.
And Constance, are you planning on going on tour with this soon? or
I
something like that?
visited the Johnson City Public Library, and I'm going to be doing an event, a virtual event at Books of Wonder on Saturday, which I'm really excited about. I'm going to be doing, yes, I'm doing a few bookstores, and yeah, it is fun to visit different places. I had a lot of fun in Johnson City, the library. Actually, I read to very young kids. I guess the group was mostly 3 to 5, but there were some babies there too, and they did seem to love it.
I'd like to ask both of you, how has being in a writer's group helped you with your process and with your success?
Well, I have been in a number of writing groups over the years, and I think one of the biggest things is it gives you a sense of community, because when you write, it's very solitary.
Yes.
And it's wonderful to have other people, and it's kind of a crazy business. I mean, my husband will say, I don't know how anybody does this and how they stay in business, because it's slow. And so it's kind of nice to have friends who understand what you're going through. And the other thing is sometimes you get so close to whatever you're working on that you don't see the problem with it. And then the people in your critique group can kind of point out, have you thought of doing it this way? And usually you want to smack yourself upside the head and go, how did I miss that? But yeah.
Yes, I agree with everything that Shannon said. It's just so valuable to have other people offering feedback on your writing. It helps you become a stronger writer. And I also will say, when I was in my Secret Gardeners group, which is one of the groups that we're in together, before I started writing Mr. Puffball, someone in my group said, I'm thinking about doing a graphic novel. And I said, I'm going to do that too. So it's just great because you're like bouncing ideas off each other, and it just does really help. And as a support group, it's huge too. And there are so many ups and downs in this business. You know, you get all excited, a book came out. Oh no, what happened? I didn't sell another book. Right? A little emotional roller coaster, but
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's great to be in touch with other writers.
My husband always laughs because I'll get irritated sometimes. Something won't go my way, and I'll go, I'm through with this. I am not doing this anymore.
I
I
hear that
had it. And then like maybe 2 weeks later, I'll have a new idea, and he'll go, what are you doing? I go, I'm working. He said, I thought you were quitting.
Yes, Stephanie.
So from the at-home audience, Bobby Pyron, who's another author here in town.
Yes.
Question for you, Shannon. How does your process differ between writing a novel and writing picture books?
When I write a novel, I outline, and I usually have a lot of notes. And when I write a picture book, I usually have the picture book in my head. I have the whole thing in my head before I sit down to write. And so it doesn't take me very long to write a picture book because it's all here. But when I write a novel, it's not all here. It's continually evolving as I write. Like I'll have an outline, but I'll think, ooh, that really should be chapter 9 instead of chapter 4, and I'll move it around. And it's more of a work in progress, more of a static thing than when I'm writing a picture book.
I'll just take a pause in case there's any more inside before I go to the next at-home question. Okay. So Constance, this is from our friend Amy Cherricks. What's it like to be part of a new imprint's debut list?
Oh, it's been so exciting.
And if you
Yes.
just say what that means
Yes.
for folks.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will. So my books up till Everybody Says Meow were all printed by HarperCollins, published by HarperCollins, and that was also great. And then my excellent editor, Jill Davis, who I mentioned, she started her own imprint. So that means she went to a new independent publisher. They're called Astra Books, and her imprint is called Hippo Park, and it's brand new. And I was one of her first 7 books on her debut list. So it's just very dynamic and exciting, and I'm getting a lot of great attention and help from being in a, smaller house. It's like I'm one of their, big book. I'm one of 7 books as opposed to one of a million. And I still, HarperCollins was great too, but it's just fun. It's kind of a different kind of dynamism and excitement and enthusiasm about being with a new project and a new imprint. So yeah, it's been great.
So another question for you, Shannon. This is from Debbie at home, who says, Shannon, your family history is so connected to Appalachia. Are you planning to ever write a picture book or novel based on your ancestors or relatives?
I actually have written 3 novels based on my ancestors or relatives. My very first novel was called The Ballad of Jessie Pearl, and that novel is about the tuberculosis pandemic in the 1920s. And my grandmother actually was alive during that pandemic, and both of her sisters developed tuberculosis. One went away to a sanatorium in Black Mountain, and she actually got better. And the other sister who stayed at home died from tuberculosis. And so that was my first book. It's called The Ballad of Jessie Pearl, based on family history. The second book is called Ruby Lee and Me, and that book is about school integration in the 1960s. And my elementary school in 1967, I was in 1st grade, and that was the first year that our school became integrated, and our school's first African-American teacher actually taught me to read. And so that's where the school integration plot came from in Ruby Lee and Me. And there's actually a scrapbook in the back of Ruby Lee and Me that's black and white photos of my family and of my elementary school teacher. And then One True Way is about 2 girls who have a crush on each other. And that book is based on my sister and what it was like for her growing up in the 1970s as somebody who was attracted to girls. So I have done 3, and actually my novel One True Way is a departure from family history. So it was the first one I'd written that really was not based on family history.
So that's great. Debbie has some reading to do, it sounds like. That's awesome. We have a question from Maureen that's for both of you. When you do school presentations, do you get the students involved in the presentation?
Yeah, I was just in Burnsville as part of the Carolina Mountains Literary Festival, and I went into an elementary school there, and I usually ask some questions of the audience, and I always tell them if they've got questions that they can raise their hand. And usually with kids, they're not like adults. They're not afraid to raise their hand. They're not afraid to speak up. And so usually it's more of a challenge to keep them, to let you do your presentation.
That's true.
Because they want to talk.
That's true. And I love going into classrooms, and definitely kids get very involved. I've had way more experience at this point with Everybody Says Meow. And it's a kind of on every page, the cat saying meow, excuse me. And then a dog pops in and says, woof. And then all the kids will want to say meow as that happens. So they're definitely doing the animal sounds with me. And I sometimes bring some simple puppets, and then we kind of reinforce that, all the different animal sounds. And also I usually will do a drawing component too. And it's just really fun to have kids draw along with me. They love it. And I just try to make it as interactive as possible. And I think that's one of the really fun things. As you said, kids just love to be involved. I know usually when I'm talking about Everybody Says Meow, I'll start out with who likes dogs and who likes cats. And then when it's time for the question time at the end of my presentation, all the kids want to tell me about their cats and their cats' names and their dogs and their dogs' names. And I was at one recently, and a kid said, I have 10 dogs at home. And I was like, is he going to tell me the name of every dog? What am I going to do? But it's great. Yeah, I love it.
I'll take another pause in case we've got some more questions. In the store? Okay. So back to the at-home audience, who's asking a lot of questions. Thank you,
Nice.
at-home
Thank you.
audience. So Carol actually has two. I'm gonna give you the shorter one first, Shannon. These are for you. And it's just she wants you to repeat the title of book 4 in your storyteller series, and then Patricia will put that in the chat for us.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's called Of Words and Water, the story of Wilma Dykeman, writer, historian, environmentalist.
Excellent, thank you. And then the longer question from Carol, she's saying 7 to 10 is not the typical age for picture books, but I can see how your books would appeal to that age group. And have you seen this age group engaged, with your books?
Yes.
The illustrations, yeah.
When I was just in Burnsville, yeah. I was talking to an older audience, I think 3rd and 4th grade, and they were really into Sophie's art. I had a lot more slides that went into the art aspects and how she had made this stuff. And that seemed to be the thing that just captivated them, was how did she do that? And so, we did a lot of talking about that, and, props to Sophie for having me prepped to handle those kind of questions. And yeah, they kind of get into the family history kind of stuff. And, when we did the Jean Ritchie book, which was the one that I spent the most time on in Burnsville, we had a lot of song lyrics. We had some of her song lyrics. And so we talked about songwriting. And we also talked about environmental issues. And, the kids shared with me things that they do to take care of the environment. They were talking about, recycling and picking up trash and all these things. So.
Can I say something about that
Sure,
topic also?
course.
Because I talk to teachers a lot just on Twitter and different social media. And I really think there's a push among some teachers to say, and I know a lot of picture book authors feel this way too, picture books can be for any age. I love reading picture books. I'm 59. And I know I said something that recently on Twitter about that, and I had a lot of teachers say, oh yeah, my middle schoolers, sometimes that's just like a fun break for them, or there's something to learn from them, or they just enjoy them. And I even had some teachers say picture books in high school. So I think that's so great. And especially for something like that with a historical, beauty and of that would appeal. Yeah, I love that.
Constance, I'm gonna pose a question a version of a question that was posed to Shannon earlier to you about the difference between writing different kinds of books, because you write picture books that are designed more for younger kids, and then also middle grade books.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit and how that process is different for you?
Yeah, fortunately, my middle grade novels that I wrote were very heavily illustrated. So it was still me really using my love of visual art and drawing and pictures to get across a story. But I feel like this is I do love middle grade also, but my heart is really with this kind of younger kids and picture books. I love that format. So, I just love it all, but I think I especially love writing and for this age group. I love visiting kindergartners and the little kids, and they're so excited that you're there. And sometimes I tell them how old I am, and they're just shocked.
Did they ask you how much you weigh? I had that.
Thank goodness, no.
Yes, I had that question. I was in Omaha, Nebraska, and doing some school visits, and one kid raised his hand and asked me how much I weigh.
I like when they ask me how much money you make too.
Oh, I've had that one
How
also.
much?
How much money do they pay you to write a book?
And I also like saying, when I was a kid, we had no computers, and you could see they just don't even believe me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. We don't have any more questions from the at-home audience. So not necessarily last call, but in case anything else has occurred to anyone in
I guess I'd like to ask you about what would you say to aspiring authors?
Oh, that's a good question.
Can you repeat that question just in case folks can't hear it?
Yes, my sister's asking, what would we say to aspiring authors? And I'll start if that's okay. I submitted my first book when my kid was about 1 year old, so about 18, 19 years ago. And I definitely had that enthusiasm, like, I wrote something, someone should publish it. It took me a while of, really writing and joining SCBWI, which is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. It's an incredible organization and resource for aspiring kid book writers. Going to conferences, taking classes, and just learning, okay, I wasn't really ready to be published before, and just keep at it, learn what you can, join a writers group, join SCBWI, and try not to get discouraged, because there's a lot of rejection before you finally get to that yes.
I would just say it will take you longer than you think it will.
Yes.
And it will take a lot. There's a steep learning curve that you just don't know about when you start. And my son came home from school, first grade, and he said that they had written picture books in his class and nobody had dedicated a book to him, and every other kid in the class had a book dedicated to them.
Oh.
And I said, well, it's because they don't know you very well. We had just moved. And I said, all these kids have gone to kindergarten together. They don't know you. They didn't mean to hurt your feelings. And he said, well, it did. It hurt my feelings. And I said, I'm going to write a real book and dedicate it to you.
Oh.
He was in first grade. My first published book was when he was a senior in high school.
And he said, finally.
No, he said, I dedicated the book to him. And he said, way to persevere, Mom. I've given up on that.
Good one.
But there's just a lot to learn, and there's just they don't want to take a chance on you because there's so many people doing it that know what they're doing. So you really have to learn the ropes. Somebody said to me, you wouldn't walk onto a stage and think you could dance in a ballet, or you wouldn't walk into an art gallery and think they were going to put your picture on the wall. Why do you think you're going to write something and send it to a publisher and they're going to publish it? They're not, until you learn what you're doing. But you can learn. I'm proof.
Yes, you can learn. And the other thing I forgot to say, I hope I didn't interrupt you,
No.
is that everybody who is interested should read so many contemporary picture books, because you might be thinking of picture books when you were a kid and they were great ones, but it's kind of a new world too. And you should just know what's happening in picture. You should read so many.
Yeah.
Or whatever genre you're in.
Think about it. You probably wouldn't wear clothes from the 1950s. Maybe, but probably not. Styles have changed. And so have books. So you really have to be familiar with what's being published now.
That's great advice. Thank you. And since we don't have any more questions from the at-home audience, this will be the actual last call for the folks in the store, because we're headed to the top of the hour, and I want to give y'all time for some last words. So any final questions? Yes.
I know you have the William Duncan book and the pipeline.
Yes.
What are you currently working on, and what are you currently working on? What's your next big project?
My next big project is another novel. It will be coming out in 2024. And I'm not sure what the name of it's going to be yet, because publishers seem to be notorious at saying, I don't like that title. Can you give me another list? So I've turned in another list of possible titles, but they haven't told me which one is going to be yet. And I just recently finished the first round of edits. I'm sure there'll be another round of edits. It takes a lot longer to edit a novel than it does, or to revise a novel than it does a picture book. And so that's my next thing, which will be coming in 2024. It is about a young girl who has a disease called fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva, or FOP for short. And I actually have a co-author on that book, and she has the disease. And so we wrote about what it's like for a young girl to be diagnosed with this, and to know that her future is going to be impacted, because when you have this disease, you actually grow another skeleton.
Wow.
And so you become sort of immobilized. And so Amy is now in her 30s, and we wrote about a lot of it is based on her childhood.
That sounds incredible. And I am working on another picture book that's coming out next year. And it's called Itty Bitty Betty Blob. And it's about a little blob who lives in a world filled with monsters. And she just feels different. She doesn't feel like she belongs. And through some things that happen at picture day at her monster school, she sort of learns to appreciate who she is. And so do the other creatures around her.
Well, thank you both so much for the great conversation and sharing your books with us. Before we say goodnight to the at-home audience and let folks here get their book signed, what would you like to leave us with this evening?
I forgot to mention that my book next year is being illustrated by Micah Player, who is someone I admire so much, and just the joy of working with other illustrators. I also just want to say thank you so much. It just means a lot to see you all here and for listening to us talk about our new books. So thank you, and thank you to Malaprops and to everybody here for making this happen.
Yeah, I would just like to thank my neighbors. Thank you for coming.
Oh.
And the people that ask me questions online, I recognize your names. I know who you are. Thank you for showing up. And thanks to Malaprops and thanks to Constance, because this was her idea. She invited me. So
Yay. I have a lot of good ideas.
she does.
Well, thank you both so much.